And we're live. Good evening and welcome to our virtual presentation of Spilt Milk with author Courtney Zoffness and moderator Edan Lepucki. For those who purchased a copy of Spilt Milk tonight, we do have signed book plates available. So to receive one, just click on the green purchase button directly below the viewer's screen. It will take you to our website where you can complete your purchase, and just make sure to write signed book plate in the comments section when you're checking out your cart. Also, this event includes an audience Q&A. To submit a question, just use the Ask a Question button at the very bottom of the screen. You can also vote for any questions you'd like for our guests to answer, and they will make their way to the very top of the list. Okay, so let me introduce our guests, and then we can jump right in. So Courtney Zoffness won the Sunday Times Shorty Award, an Emerging Writers Fellowship from the Center for Fiction, residency fellowships from the MacDowell Colony, and more. Her work has appeared in the Paris Review Daily, the Southern Review, Long Reads, Los Angeles Review of Books, and among others. And joining her tonight is Edan Lepucki, the author of the novella If You're Not Yet Like Me, and the novels California and Woman Number 17. She's the contributing editor to The Millions and the founder of Writing Workshops Los Angeles. So with that said, I'm going to turn my camera off and we're going to jump right into the talk. Enjoy, everyone.
Thank you so much, Vera. And thanks for having us tonight. And hi, everyone.
Hi. You're really blurry to me. Is it my computer or yours?
Oh, Vera was just really blurry to me. You look clear to me.
I think it's your connection, Courtney. Because I see you a little bit pixelated, but
I look pixelated?
Yes, but it should be better as soon as the connection is a little bit more solid.
Yeah, it's like you're a cool ghost. It's okay.
Oh gosh. Oh, don't know what to do about that.
I'm sure we'll just come back. You know how the internet is sort of
yes.
capricious.
I can try to join from the hotspot on my phone. Sorry, this is horrible. Rira, do you recommend my trying to switch my source of connection?
I think ask Rira. What do you think, Rira?
I think it will get better because earlier it was fine. So I'm guessing I'll go back to what,
Edan, you just let me know if I seem ghosty. Or like
Sherry
human.
Mudd says, it's a mini facelift or a soft
lens. Okay, go on. Let's keep it.
Go on. Hi, Courtney. Congratulations on your book. I'll hold it up here.
Oh, thank you, Edan. I wish I had your copy of yours with me. Thank you so much.
It's really a beautiful, I was just rereading it today and admiring just the prose alone and the honesty and the humor. I really love this book. So I'm excited to do this event with you.
I'm so excited.
Do you want to do a short reading to start set the tone?
Yeah, I don't have like a blurry voice, right? I sound totally fine. Okay. So I'm going to read just from the opening. It's a section called The Only Thing We Have to Fear. It requires no context. Here is my oldest son, age 5, at not quite 6 a.m. I can't go to school. His eyes are wild, lidless. I wrench out the worry like a splinter. His schoolmates have learned new things and he won't be able to follow. We've been out of town. He has missed Monday's class. I rub his back, offer reassurances. Maybe you'll feel better after breakfast, I say. When I head to the kitchen, he slams his bedroom door, bars himself inside. Don't make me go. Mommy and Daddy would never suggest you do something that's a bad idea, I say, and wonder if it's true. He barely removes the thumb from his mouth as I pull a shirt over his head. I lure him out of the house with a lollipop. Midway into the 6-minute walk, his panic mounts. What time is it? He says. Am I late? He takes off down the sidewalk. Honey, you're not late, I call. I catch up with him at the intersection, a network of strollers and scooters and clasped hands. He is doubled over. I have to poop, he says. School's across the street. We'll go to the second floor bathroom, I say. No, he screams and stamps his feet. He is wearing light-up shoes. We drift upstairs with the crowd, and I report him present to his teacher while he twists beside me in visceral discomfort. He agrees to use the toilet only if I wait outside the bathroom, but any relief I feel over this deal dissipates when he reemerges seconds later, pants at his ankles. I don't have to go anymore, he says. zipping up his fly. Are you sure? Want to just sit for a minute and see? I can't, he says, and hurries to class. Later, he will tell my husband that he was secretly sobbing in bed before he called out to us that morning, that he knew it was silly, but couldn't stop. A memory. My brother and I sourcing scrap wood from the yard of a home that has recently burned down. We want to build a tree house. I spot a square just the right size for the floor, but it turns out that in the blaze, the lawn has transmuted into sticky mud, and it suctions my shoes, envelops my calves. A few yards away, my brother is swallowed up to his knees. He screams. I'm older, the designated protector. Panic saturates my chest. And then, as if only to test my tolerance, a blue van pulls up. Kidnappers drive blue vans. We have been warned to steer clear. A pale man with a splotchy beard pokes his head out the window. Can I help? We are perfect prey, stuck in a muddy trap on a quiet cul-de-sac around the corner from home, out of our parents' view. I holler and squirm and somehow tug off my shoes and force my way to the dry edge of the property. I am crying. My brother is bawling. Young lady, the man repeats, need help? I need my father, but retrieving him will mean leaving my brother alone with a strange man. My brother is heaving so hard that I can't understand him. Is he saying go or no? Have I just imagined that the mud is higher on his waist, his body lower in the earth, the driver's pointed teeth? I back up slowly, then quickly, then sprint home in socked feet, screaming, frantic, bellowing for my father to come. Hurry, danger, death. The kidnapper is gone when we return. My brother is not. My father, in his trusty Timberlands, tugs my brother free. I'll stop there.
Thank you. So probably, I was going to say, for those of you who don't know, or probably nobody knows, but Courtney, you and I met at the Vermont Studio Center, which
Forever
is
ago.
writing retreat, I think I want to say 2005.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So that was a really, really long time ago. Scarily that's how long ago it was.
Yeah.
And when I met you, you were a fiction writer.
I still am.
You won a very famous award for fiction. And I assumed that's what I was going to say. I assumed that you were going to be like, I still am a fiction writer. But I would just love to know, just, this is sort of, I'm sure you get this question first every time, but I just am so curious, and I'm sure everyone would want to know, like, how did you start writing these essays? When did you start sort of like, was it a moment, did you set out and be like, oh, I'm going to write a book of essays? Or was it like were you in a slow denial about it? Tell us about the kind of fruition here.
Yes, I'm clearly still in the slow denial. I got so defensive. I was like, I am a fiction writer. So, this book, conveniently, I guess, considering its subject, it was really born out of motherhood. I was working on a fiction project, and things were happening in my life. I found and find, just childbirth and motherhood to be so intense and kind of mesmerizing, even as I'm in it, that I just had this sort of documentary impulse. And also I find it to be really hard. So I was trying to gain some clarity around particular moments or experiences or observations, and writing my way through them. I didn't find answers, but I gained some clarity. And I was writing these sort of one at a time, and then gave a reading somewhere. And this person who had invited me to give a reading, a friend of mine, had assigned his students some nonfiction because it was a nonfiction class. So I, sort of quickly reread the essays to remember what I had written, and realized that the other pieces I was working on had several themes in common, and that I was probably writing a book. And there were others I wanted to write too that kind of fit together. So it kind of came about, I don't want to say accidentally, because it sounds like I didn't do it, but it didn't come about intentionally.
Yeah. And were you at the same time working on the fiction, or was there a time when you were like, oh, I'm actually not working on the fiction at all? I'm kind of enmeshed and ensconced. I don't know what word I want. Enveloped by this nonfiction word.
All the N.
All the EN words, right?
Yeah. Well, I think once I realized it, I committed to it. And I wanted a project to finish first, and it took me a little while. I'm still doing it, but to sort of find the project that was worth my following it to the end. And I feel like I've been writing sort of small things, but to find a long project that I could sustain and that could sustain me was a lot of trial and error. And this one could.
Yeah. I'm curious, when I write nonfiction, I think because I don't tend to think of it as like my lane, there's a part of me that's like, should I be doing this? But then it's so freeing because I have no kind of preconceived notions of what kind of writer I am as a nonfiction writer. I sort of just go, and it's almost feels like when I have students do in-class writing exercises and they're really new to writing, their writing is always like miraculously good.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe because they have for so many years not written, and then they have all this like wealth of imagery at their fingertips almost. Mm-hmm. Did you feel anything similar to that in terms of just, was there a sense of freedom to changing genres and just diving in?
I think because it's creative nonfiction, which is to say, it's true stories that are using a lot of the techniques of fiction. It didn't feel so different. And I read a lot of creative nonfiction, and I teach it too. I teach them both simultaneously. It's one of my favorite classes to teach. And I love showing students essays that like don't look anything like the ones they wrote to get into college, or like the ones they're writing in their literature classes. Just there's all this depth and all this shape and all these layers, and they can just break it up. And I try to be playful like that in fiction, but I think it's really just, it can be really mind-blowing for these students. And I find it really exciting as a writer to get to play in the space of truth, but using all those techniques.
Yeah. Were there any books or essay collections or individual essays that you looked to when you were kind of thinking about this book as a whole, or like a particular essay that you were like, oh, what could I read to help me visualize this better?
I've been doing this for a long time. Cue when we met. So 15 years. And I think teaching all that time and reading constantly, a lot of the stuff just sort of metabolized. I mean, I can tell you writers whose work I reread, but it wasn't like, I'm stuck in this spot in this essay. Like, who can I turn to? I think Joanne Beard is wonderful. I think Lydia Yuknovich is wonderful. There's a columnist in the Paris Review named Sabrina Ora Mark.
My God, her essays are amazing.
I mean, she's my spirit animal. Just everything I read, I'm just like, oh my gosh. But I think I gravitate to writers who like care a lot about language, are willing to play with form, but still are narrative. So I think those have been like models for me, even though I didn't realize I was going to write a book of nonfiction. I think that's, sort of the path I took.
Yeah. I would love to talk to you about sentences, and you just said you really like prose, and I guess I this is a weird question because if someone asked me this, I really don't know if I would have an answer. But even the little section that you read, I'm just curious about the way that you make, I don't even know what the question is, but like, how do you make sentences happen, or what works? What is imagery doing for you? Like just the beautiful stuff. His eyes are wild, comma, lidless. I wrench out the worry like a splinter. And then you do little things like, we heard it. You have this scene with your son going to school, and then there's a space break, and then you just write a memory, period. And then you go into the memory of you and your brother in front of the house and in the quick mud, or whatever you want to call it. And I guess I just want to know. And then later you say, he makes me pinky swear, breath snags on a branch in my throat. I was like, oh, I wish I wrote that. So you want to talk a little bit about like what sentences mean for you and how you go about writing? What is the drafting process for you?
I love that you asked that question. And I was speaking with another writer recently about how, reviews never really talk about language.
No, it's a shame.
And it is, because it's everything, it's like, it is the vehicle. It is the thing. I love language, and I was just teaching poetry this morning, and so what is my process for composing sentences? Much like the process of finding a project or figuring out a structure, it can be a lot of trial and error, but I write out loud because I care a lot about how, the words sound. And so, I write sentences, read them. I listen for rhythm. I mean, at this point, again, because I've been doing it for 20 years, more than that, I think some of these, techniques have just sort of coalesced. And so I don't have to sort of think my way through them, but finding the right image or metaphor, that is trial and error. I think when I first went to grad school at 23, I couldn't
just for the record, we were babies 15 years ago. Okay.
Yes, seriously. And we're 26 now.
Yeah.
When
you were in graduate school.
When I went to grad school, the writers who made me want to be fiction writers were like Toni Morrison and Zora Neale Hurston, and again, really like writers who use really lush prose to tell stories. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know how to do so in ways that were subtle. So it was like, I described trees for pages with like every, shade of green. It was like synonym, adverb, adverb, adverb. Hopefully it wasn't that bad, but I do remember, and I told this story to students before, that I wrote this story that I thought was so awesome when I was 23 it was basically like a knockoff of The Wizard of Oz. It was like someone who like it was either dreamed in black and white, but like lived in color. It was horrible. But I remember using the phrase cerulean seas to describe like the ocean, cerulean, a shade of blue. And a whole conversation erupted, which, clearly I'm still traumatized by, but it was very instructive about, I'm not really traumatized by it, but about how I had to write less cerulean. And that became like the word for the semester. And it was like, if anyone was just like really laying it on thick, it took me a long time to figure out how to like utilize those instincts in a way that was actually productive and didn't distract from the story or whatever it was I was trying to say. That took a lot of practice.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think I had a similar kind of trajectory where I was really drawn to those similar kinds of writers and loved like poetic prose, and then figuring out where, like, hitting that sweet spot sort of.
Right. When to exercise it and when to ignore it.
It's funny because I think as I get older, I either tend to like things that feel really maximalist, for lack of a better word, but everything has to be there. Or I like super spare.
You mean sentences like
maximalist? As a reader, I mean.
Right.
But I guess I just like a choice. I'd like someone to make a choice. I don't like it to be bland. Right. When I teach character, I teach, I don't actually teach the whole essay because I don't teach nonfiction, but the Philip Lopate essay on the necessity of turning oneself into a character. Have you read that? Is that like a common teaching tool?
I haven't read it in a long time.
Yeah. Well, I'm just gonna cherry pick a quote from it. So no pressure, but I teach it actually. I teach this quote. I did when I taught it recently. I used this quote on a Google slide because the class was on Zoom, and I use it for fiction writing. But he says, you need to see yourself from the ceiling to take, quote, an inventory of yourself. And he goes on to say, like, to know when you're charming or annoying or selfless or petty, whatever. His adjectives are better than mine. And so that you can present yourself to the reader as, quote, a specific legible character. And after I read this essay and started using it, I became kind of obsessed with this idea of characters as being specific, but also legible. That is to say, unique and individual and what makes them different. They're not just a type, but also not so specific that they're not legible as like a human that you might meet that could be a real person.
Right. So you think legible as like believable.
Yeah, and just like readable as in like, oh, I recognizable in some way as being part of humanity, I guess. I just think that's a really interesting combination. And I thought I teach it in fiction when we think about creating made up people, which may be based on someone you know or whatever. But I think it's really interesting. I mean, he meant it for memoir and writing about the I, like when you put the I on the page. And so I guess I'm curious about how you think about, especially someone who's coming from the world of fiction writing and creating fictional characters, how you kind of approached the project of putting yourself as a fictional character, as a non-fictional character, as the I, and what it meant, and like creating that specific legible person. And I think you did it. And like, did you have to like see yourself from above and like assess who you are? And you kind of admit, like, I feel like the essay about the mikveh, you talk about this shameful thing where you and your friend Carrie, I don't know if that's her real name. It is. You and Carrie sort of like made fun of another girl at the camp, and that like deep shame that you felt about it. And I was like, wow, that's something everybody carries. Everyone carts around these various shames they have from their youth or from last year or whatever. But we don't often see people freely admitting it and kind of like wrestling with it, or just like placing it for the reader to take with it what they will. So I'm rambling again, but go answer my question, which is just a ramble.
I'm trying to think of which one.
Creating yourself as a character.
How to enter it, right. So I think the first thing I'll say is that I think, again, one of the reasons I love creative nonfiction is because I think it is this nebulous space in between. And I really appreciate that you use the word character, or that Philip does, in describing a human in nonfiction, because all of the people, myself included in here, I think of as characters. Like, there's no way this is me in all my dimensions. This is me, thinking about one particular idea, and you learn a handful of details, which hopefully does seem specific enough and legible enough. But I think it's like sort of an unrealizable goal to capture like anybody all the way around. So that's that part. Wait, the shame part. Okay, so you were asking how you create characters, and it is very much like fiction in that it's like the shadow and the light. And I think for readers to trust me, especially since I'm sharing stories about other people maybe doing, things that they could be judged for, or things that upset me, there's no way in which I would be, I would have any authority if I didn't demonstrate that I am deeply flawed as well.
Yeah.
So that certainly was one of my aims. I'm also not, a very shy or private person. So sharing things like, in writing an essay about how I want to raise generous children, which was one of the aims of the essay you describe, and thinking about ways in which, I have failed at that front, it seems really essential.
Totally. And I imagine, I feel like whenever I write something nonfictional, that's creative nonfiction, however creative it is, there is some element of catharsis there for me, where I'm like, I have created, in being able to wonder about a subject on the page, I have, like you said, you didn't come up with any answers really, but you asked some questions and you kind of you had some clarity, I think is what you said.
It is.
And I have felt that there is sort of like an emotional release in putting myself and my experience on the page. Did you feel there was any catharsis involved in writing any of these essays?
Maybe it sounds very cheesy, but no emotional catharsis. Maybe some intellectual catharsis.
I mean, I don't think I would, like, I don't want you to imagine me like sobbing, like, I've realized it.
That was what I was thinking you were doing. So I'm really disappointed to know that that's not your experience. I'm wearing these really cheap, cheesy headphones that are falling out. Sorry. Look at these. Okay. These are like from 1985.
Yeah, I don't have any of those. Mine are all uncool. I can land a plane with these, though. So
totally. Take us home. Sorry.
I don't know what we were talking about.
Oh wait,
catharsis.
No. Yes, catharsis. So I think I write about some difficult relationships or the challenge of motherhood. Those relationships are still in my life. Parenthood is still a challenge. I feel like it didn't feel cathartic because it's still live, it's still ongoing.
Yeah.
But I think there were certain experiences, like writing about my son's cop obsession, which that piece took a really long time for me to figure out, like, how am I organizing this, and what is the aim here? And the aim was to try to figure out what the incentive was, like what was motivating this obsession, which is still ongoing 2 years later. And so I think in writing it, I kind of did figure it out for myself.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I came to some kind of understanding, and that felt satisfying. I don't know if I'd call it cathartic, but it was satisfying.
I do love that feeling of when you're like, oh, now, and I've had it, especially with writing personal essays. I feel like where I'm like, oh, that's what I'm writing about, or that's what I'm trying to figure out. That's such a cool thing that happens.
Right. You write to discover what you know.
Yes.
Somebody else said that. It wasn't me.
Oh, we have a question about who is I think, it says, I'm sorry, I missed it. Please, Sherry wants to know, please repeat the name of the essayist you read / admire. I think it was Joanne Beard.
I said Joanne Beard, who's got a new book that's just out.
Is that fiction or nonfiction?
It's nonfiction. Lydia Yuknovich.
Oh yeah, let's see if I can. I don't know if I'm going to be able to.
Okay, this is a test, a spelling test. Yuknavitch. She also writes fiction and nonfiction.
I know the name, but I would have never gotten that one.
Okay. Also T. Kira Madden.
Oh yeah.
No period after the T.
Oh.
Who's got a memoir. Look, I didn't even see you doing it. I just knew.
She's new. So there's no period. What does that mean?
It's just how she was named.
Oh, her name is just T.
It's T. Kira. It's T.
T. Kira. Oh. That's so cool.
But she's got a beautiful memoir called Long Live the Tribe of Fatherless Girls that she wrote as a series of essays that stitched together as a memoir, and also started as a fiction writer. And she actually has a wonderful essay called Against Catharsis about how writing, that the traumas that appear in this particular memoir, are still live in her body.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can't get rid of them, really, can you?
Right. You just make art.
Just make art again and again. I'm always curious about what subjects writers kind of circle and recircle around. Mm-hmm. Like I'm always interested in my own. I'm like, oh, I'm writing about that again.
I know,
I thought I was writing about
like a broken record,
but I'm not. And so I wonder, if somebody was like, well, what are in my classes? I always say, like, what is the deeper subject of the piece? And I find it useful to ask myself that of my own work.
Are you good at it?
I mean, about my own work, no.
Yeah.
Or I'm good at it after like draft 5 and 4 years later.
Right.
I'll be like, oh, that's what I was writing about. But that's what readers are for, early readers.
Exactly.
But I feel like, of course, your book to me is about.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd take this one.
Well, I mean, there's some obvious ones, obviously, that are more like literal, like mothering and being mothered, which is a huge one for me. So anytime there's literature about that, I just eat it up. Love it. Obviously, belief and fear, faith, those sort of circling together. And then I think there's a lot here about you kind of reading yourself. Like you're trying to like describe who you are and why you're like this and trying to figure it out a little bit. Like there's a great when you're in chaos theory. Is this the last essay? Mm-hmm. Your therapist sends you to a astrologist, right?
Yes.
And then it says on page 198, I want to tell you too about storytelling. Do you want to read that little paragraph there?
Sure. Where?
Just the end of the paragraph, probably.
Okay. I want to tell you too about storytelling, how my drive to bring the imaginal into the real. Imaginal is a word
that she uses.
Yeah. How my drive to bring the imaginal into the real is accompanied by a fondness for narrative, for beginnings and endings. How I delight in transformation, not only in characters on the page, but as a writer, as a reader. How I can feel pulverized and remade by stories. A glass orb turned into a pile of shimmering shards, turned into a framed work of art. How I seek this experience in real life too.
You probably have to read the essay to get all the references here. But I feel like this is what it makes sense that this is the last essay to me, because this is sort of what's happening in the in the book as a whole is this idea of you kind of shaping things into narrative, being like, this is a girl that I went to Jewish camp with, and this is what she became, and this is why I became this, and now we're meeting, and why are we different, and here we're the same, and this is what my mother was like then, and this is what she's like now, and this is why I'm like this now, and this is how my child is, and this is what I'm like, and how I mean, and I think that a lot of people do this, but they don't realize that they're doing it. And so you're, by writing it down, you sort of like give that narrative shape to something that I think most humans do. Although I think you as a writer do it more because you're a writer and an artist. But would you agree with that? Do you think that those are the deeper subjects of your work? Do you feel like there's other subjects that you're always going back to? Do you feel like your fiction is similar in terms of what spheres you're interested in?
I don't think, there's some overlap.
I can't hear you.
Oh.
Can anybody else
Can you hear me?
I can hear Courtney just fine.
Somebody
Eden, can
chat,
you hear me?
tell us if you can hear us.
Yeah, can someone in the audience? I can hear you, both of you just fine.
That would be a problem. Can people hear us? Eden, talk.
I can't hear you still.
You can't hear me?
Can you hear me? Courtney? Am I the only one who can't hear?
Yes.
Oh.
Take your headphones out. Take your headphones.
That was my fault.
Oh, it was? Okay.
It was all me, but everyone was silent. So I was like, where is everybody?
Thanks for the panic.
Thank you to the chat for responding.
Okay. You guys, this pilot here crashed the plane because I pushed the
I'm never going on a flight with you.
I apologize. What did you say? What did you say? Now I'm really hot and sweaty because I have to take this off.
That was almost a crash landing.
Oh my God. Sorry about that.
I tried to say that there is, those are, you did name a lot of the themes, I think. And definitely, it's a memoir. So by definition, it's self-explorative, I think, self-exploratory. And I think motherhood is something I've explored even before I became a mother. I mean, I remember asking a friend in grad school who had just had a child to like fact check how I described pregnancy because I was I was making it up. So I think that is a subject, that you can analyze, you Eden can, my interest in, but I think it has, that's been central to a lot of my fiction. I think in fiction, I play a lot more with power dynamics. I'm really interested in like the powerful and the vulnerable and the intersection there. And I write a lot about predatory behavior for some reason or another. So that's a drain I circle.
Yeah, so interesting. What has it been like? I know obviously you're still parenting, like you said, that's not nothing, and that's obviously nothing that would be solved. But I'm curious, as someone who is a parent and writes a lot about parenting and thinks a lot about what it means to write about my own children, if you had any thoughts as you were working on the book regarding, like, I don't know. For me, I never was like, do I need permission to write about this? But maybe other people feel like they need to ask permission in some way, even to themselves. But did you have any rules for yourself in terms of what you would share, or was there anything that you were careful that you wanted to make sure that, I always am like, I never want to present myself as like a really great mother. Not that I'm a bad mother, but I just want to make sure that
you're average.
I'm just average. I'm a perfectly fine, flawed mother, like everyone. But I just want to make sure that I'm never presenting myself in this like rarefied light.
Of course. I think when I first was writing these, again, because I didn't think about it as a book, and some of them I didn't even think about as essays. I was literally just writing through an experience until I realized, I wanted to do something more with it. I gave myself permission to just write at first, but I do have a relationship with the permission question. My kids are mostly like under 5 in these, and for some reason, because they're so dependent and little, that felt okay to me to have their likeness represented. But I recently wrote something where my oldest is now 9, and appeared in the New York Times, and I asked his permission before it published. And by asking it, I had to be okay with him saying, I'm not comfortable. And then me being like, then I guess I'm not going to do it. Like, you can't ask the question, I don't think, if you're not prepared for the answer. But he's got opinions now.
Yeah.
And I want to respect that. I'm also aware that, I don't know who they're going to grow up to be. And I don't know what seeds of them this book holds. So I hope there's nothing in here that will prove, sort of uncomfortable. Like, it's just, I had to make a choice somewhere in that sphere. And I felt like I picked 5.
Yeah. I think, and there was nothing in here that I was like, I can't believe she's sharing that.
No, I mean, there's tons on the cutting room floor, of course.
Of course.
This is not like an expose.
When I was rereading Holy Body today, the one about your experience in the mikveh, will you first just give a short description for anyone who hasn't read it yet? What happens? What's the general conceit of the essay?
Sure. It is, I think, it has maybe 2 conceits, also maybe 10, but the 2. It is in part a portrait of a woman who was a friend of mine at a sleepaway camp when we were 8 years old. And she became a gestational surrogate for a couple who couldn't conceive on their own, a couple she had not met. This is my friend Carrie. She, in her job life, runs a progressive mikveh center, which is a ritual bath for Jews outside of Boston. And I was really fascinated. I mean, her life's work is fascinating, but I entered that essay by wanting to better understand how a person, someone I know, makes such like a radically altruistic choice. She has 3 small children and did at the time, and went through this grueling process to carry a baby for strangers before she even knew she could be compensated for it, right? She was not like a destitute person in need. She didn't, have a family member for whom she was doing this for. Like, just all the circumstances around that really sparked my interest. So she agreed to let me sort of stalk her and follow her around, and we chatted at length. And then while I was visiting her, since I'm also Jewish and therefore have permission, immersed in the mikvah to better understand her work. And it's related to her decision to be a surrogate.
This is such a masterful essay, I will say. I love it.
Thank you.
First of all, why did you decide to write in the second person? I was like, this is what I'm going to ask her.
Yeah. Well, I think, there's so much I wanted to say in here. So I felt like I needed a container for it. And I think because I was following orders and directions at the mikvah, it was like, first you must remove all the rings. Next, you need to, disrobe. Now get in the shower and scrub everything. So there were like second person directives, and there were a number of blessings or commands that you were supposed to recite. So I just, for fun, because writers like to torture themselves, was like, what if I tried to squeeze all this information into these? Like, I needed some sort of structural setup because I felt it was too unwieldy and shapeless otherwise. So I think organizing that way became really helpful, but also I just, like, the language of these directives then informed the point of view of the whole essay. Mm-hmm.
It's really cool because I admit when I first read it, I didn't notice it.
Wow.
And then I don't remember, maybe I should say I don't remember noticing it. And then today I read it, I was like, oh my God, why didn't I notice this the first time? And I think that's the mark of a really good use of the second person, where if you notice it, it might take a while, or you notice it immediately and then you stop noticing it.
Right.
But it kind of informs the whole, form following content. I also think, what was I going to say? I also just love how, like you said, it's an organizing principle, because there is so much here, because it's not only about the mikveh, but it's using that present scene of you doing this thing, which people have told, I know people have done it, but I never got as many details as I wanted. And now I have them. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And I would just before I take questions, I need the peanut gallery to ask more questions so you can get an A in this class. I'm a really hard grader, so I need you to ask some questions. But before we take questions from you, I wanted you to read this very short paragraph.
Sure.
On page 48.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's really beautiful. It starts with, well, you can start from the top.
Okay.
Just with 7 until you get to in the mikveh in all caps, maybe.
Okay. 7. The number of steps you will soon descend into the water. The figure represents wholeness and the creative process according to the text framed on the sink. God, and this is a house of God, took 6 days to create the world, but made his work complete on the 7th, the Sabbath, a day of rest. You are dubious about God, but believe in completion and the creative process. You are, for example, writing a book you hope to finish. Both physical and spiritual directives have the same aim, to cleanse and prime and hone your focus. The suite in which you stand has also been occupied by the dying and the barely survived, by the grieving, by the newly married and the freshly divorced, by the abused and the barren, by those who are mid-transformation and the transformed, by the reverent, by a woman who went blind in midlife, a fate you cannot fathom, and a paraplegic whose wife is expecting twins. In the mikveh, every body is a sacred vessel. You may hear echoes. Oh, I'm sorry. Should I stop?
No, go ahead. I felt like you should keep going, so go ahead. Yeah.
You may hear echoes of these folks as you undress, see shadows behind folds of the shower curtain, flashes in the mirror. You may wonder about the words they held in their mouths when they stood where you are. Try, though, to concentrate on your own words, on your own mouth. Heed the meditations.
That's so beautiful. I love the repetition of by the. Just so good.
You know, I did an event at the Mikveh Center.
Oh yeah, did it happen already?
It happened,
How
and
was it?
It was really fascinating and beautiful. And I did it with Anita Demont, the novelist who actually created this progressive center. And they had me do a hand washing ceremony to mark the birth of this book, you know, because and they created I was like, I'm happy to do it. I just don't want to sort of like God speak in the whatever ceremony. So they used language from this essay to create a ceremony.
Did this happen on
Zoom? It was all on Zoom. I had to turn my computer down. So I was like, here's a bowl, here's water, here are my hands. I had to remove my rings. It was really special and really unique.
That's cool. How
It
beautiful.
was really cool. I thought it was really beautiful.
I was like, I want to, my mom is Jewish, but she's a converted Jew. So I don't think you can count me as being, people are like, oh, it's through the mother. So you're Jewish. But I'm like, I think this is one of those situations where technically, but I was like, I want to go to a mikveh.
Yeah.
Well,
I go to a mikveh.
But can I? Isn't this only open to Jewish women, this mikveh?
You're technically Jewish.
Technically Jewish.
By the religious laws.
Okay, because she converted when I was 10. Does that count?
I don't know.
See, I think technically, well, maybe I can.
That's really interesting. I want to talk to you about that later.
Yeah, she remarried. My stepfather's Jewish. So interestingly, my half siblings, I have 2 of them, are Jewish. They can go to the mikveh. They can go. They'll
just tell you.
They had bat and bar mitzvah. They're like real deal. Let's see. This Susan Littman asks, what writers do you think excel in writing, quote, beautiful language, unquote?
What writers excel at writing beautiful language? We put some in the chat, and I'm remembering one we forgot to put in is Sabrina Ora Mark, who I'm going to put in here. Oh, you want to do it?
No, you can do it. If you probably remember that. I don't know how to spell
Sabrina Ora Mark.
She has a book, right? But
she does. She's a poet,
but not these fable essays.
These are coming out. A book that's using some of this, I think, is coming out fairly soon. But she writes a column for the Paris Review Daily about fairy tales and motherhood and language and art, and it's powerful and beautiful. And I think she comes to mind most immediately, just because I think she's really smart and playful. So in addition to Joanne and Lydia and Tikira, I'll add.
Tikira, now I know about Tikira. I had no idea. And I think you mentioned Toni Morrison and Zora Neale Hurston as like being your
I did. Yes.
others.
Yes, they are. They are my matriarchs. I mean, I think if we're asking, it's not a genre specific question. That's true. Yeah. Toni Morrison, Zora Neale Hurston.
So I think somebody, maybe it's Vroman's, maybe it's Reread. Will you talk a little bit about the cover?
Sure.
Is this an illustration or a painting by somebody that you know?
No, so McSweeney's is my publisher. They have a wonderful art director. They commissioned Eleanor Thompson, who's look, see, it's glittery.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful book.
Who's an artist in the UK. And I know that some writers don't get to be very involved in the process. McSweeney's is independent and small and very attentive to like creating objects of beauty, and which I'm very superficial, so I was really pleased. And I was really involved in the process. McSweeney's editor said she noticed a lot of water imagery in the essays, which, I didn't notice, but of course, upon rereading, I was like, yes, it's like the McFun and chaos theory and like the sea. I mean, it was suddenly, but just liquid and water. And since Spilt Milk was the title and there's milk spilt literally in the book. So we played a lot and then wanted a palette that reflected adjectives they thought described it, sort of warm. And it was really collaborative. And
so
I'm really pleased.
Did they ask the artist to make something with water in specific colors? And then... At
first it was just the illustration and then it was colored.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's neat.
It was fun. Yeah.
In both of my experiences, they were like, email, book cover. And I was like, wait, what? And then I opened the PDF and I was like, wait, what? Nobody warned me that this was going to happen.
Did you push back? Did you accept?
In California, it was always the sideways trees. But
I love that cover.
I love that cover. They had a totally different font that was like etched on the tree. And then my name was upside down.
Oh, that's confusing.
But then I was like, I need a better font. And then they came back with this perfect font. I was like, done. And then Woman Number 17, they had a concept that they wanted, and they were not going to veer from the concept. Okay. But it was a matter of what image was in the concept, because it was supposed to look like a keyhole, sort of. I think it was sort of a confusing concept.
Well, it is crazy the way one surrenders. It's sort of like whatever.
I didn't. Neither cover was like egregious, right. But my agent always said you have 2 rounds of feedback, so use them wisely.
That's interesting.
So I thought
I had like 30 rounds of feedback.
Yeah, but they clearly wanted you more involved.
Or I just inserted myself. But either way, it was very collaborative.
Anybody else have comments here? We kind of talked about the kids. This is an interesting question by Rira too. As a memoirist, how do you decide which experience in your life or an event is worthy of being written about? Do you think kind of everything is fair game and everything is interesting? Or
when you said everything is fair game, I thought you were asking an ethical question.
Oh.
No. Is everything interesting? I think that's a great question. And I think sometimes experiences that I don't think are particularly interesting become interesting when they're paired with other things. And I like a lot of texture. So I think I often, I think around themes sometimes or questions. And much like, I think, Edan, the example you brought up of this bigger essay, which is about a mikvah and surrogacy, but it's also about how a person makes this decision to be supremely generous in the world. And why am I not a person who would make such a decision? I started to meditate on this idea of generosity, which led me to this moment that I still feel shame about, being unkind to a girl when I knew better. And so I think, I think it depends on what I'm writing. I think texture and layers often make space for stories.
That's a good way to think about it, because I don't tend to write too much nonfiction, but I like that idea of sort of putting things side by side and seeing what kind of energy is there.
Yes, I do that in fiction too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I probably do it more naturally in fiction because I'm just like, well,
Right.
I'm just making shit up.
Right.
Do whatever I want here. Are there any other questions? What do you are you able to? Have you read anything interesting lately?
I'm reading a book I'm doing an event with a memoirist next week. It's literally sitting next to me. I was prepared, Eden.
Nice.
Speak Okinawa
Oh.
by Elizabeth Miki Brina. And I'm doing an event with her, and we're going to be in conversation. We share an agent too.
Nice.
But my agent was like, I think you'll really love it. And I am loving it.
What is it about?
I'm, a third of the way in, but she is talking about her mother is from Okinawa, and her father is a white American soldier. And she talks a lot about, so far, sort of the alienation she experiences from her mother's language and culture, and as a young kid, the sort of shame and disconnection she experiences from her mother. But also there's a lot of compassion from her retrospective point of view about a really difficult life her mother's had.
Yeah.
And it seems also like a imperialistic story and a power imbalance story.
So right up your alley.
So right up my alley, but nonfiction. But beautifully written.
Nice. Sounds good. Do we have time to answer this question?
Yeah, we have time to answer this question.
This is Maura's question.
Is it my Maura?
Maura Sheehy.
It is my Maura. Hi, Maura.
So everybody can read this, but do you think about intersections of race and class in your experience and in the issues you experience as a mother and person in the world of these essays? Can you talk about that?
Yes, I do. Maura's in my writing group.
Oh.
And was very helpful in thinking through one of the essays that I think is that I feel like is most important to me, which is Boy in Blue, about my young son's cop obsession. We live next door to a police precinct. My son's every week, multiple times a day, we pass, sort of gaggles of officers, but we also very often see arrestees being led into and out of the station, or my son wants to go visit the precinct station and we see individuals in the holding cell through the plexiglass, and it's very complicated. And I feel a lot of responsibility to be a mother who can try to explain things to him in language that he will understand at age 4, which is where that essay begins. And to my then 6-year-old son, who asks, like, why do all the people going in handcuffs have brown skin? It's like, sit down, son. How much time you got? So I think one of my aims was to try to figure out all of the ways in which, sort of my sons are being acculturated before I have a chance to explain things in language they'll understand, because the world is acting on them when I'm with them, when I'm not with them. And it feels like imperative to kind of run interference in ways. So that's, I think, the essay where I'm most explicit in attempting to tease through these situations in real time and try to engage with my son in dramatic play, which is his language, in order to create some understanding.
Very well put. Yeah.
I think that answered your question, Maura.
Yeah. Well, I agree with Maura. You see it all over the book. Like you're dealing with some pretty deep stuff.
All right. So we are at the end of our event. Thank you so much, Courtney. Thank you, Eden.
Thank you so
that was
much.
such a lovely conversation. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. Sorry about the technical hiccups, but you know how it goes for virtual events.
That was not even technical. That was Eden being an idiot with her.
Don't fly with Eden. That's
God
the takeaway.
damn it. I need those cool cordless ones.
Again, we do have signed book plates available. Just click on the green purchase button link, and then it will take you to our website. Just make sure to write signed book plate when you're checking out your book. And a replay of this talk will be available shortly. So just use the same stream link and you'll be able to rewatch the talk. So for all of you who tuned in late, don't worry, you'll be able to catch the beginning of this talk. And I think that about covers it all. Thank you so much again, and stay safe, everyone.
Thank you so much. It was great to see you, Edan.
You too. We're so cute, like we were when we were 25.
I look the same.
Have a good night, y'all.
Vera. Bye.
Good night. Thanks, Vera.